What is up, my fellow Ace trainers? Welcome back to another DGBA video where today we will be commenting over the second battle of week 1. We have Habaduh, the unsponsored coach, versus Spoink, coach of the Des Moines Delibirds. Similarly to the last video, I'll pull up each roster side by side and show which Pokemon were benched and give my educated guess as to why. With that said, let's start with Spoink's team. I immediately noticed he did not bring the Enamorous Therian, which is incredibly interesting as that's a Pokemon you almost never see left behind on the bench. But to be fair, they often have the option to Terra Evolve. Spoink does not actually have Terra for Enamorous, and with Habaduh having a Galarian Slowking, aka one of the better counters for Enamorous in the game, it makes sense as to why he was deterred from putting it on the final roster. After all, he does have 12 Pokemon to choose from, so you might as well bring the best he can offer. He also did not bring Oricorio, which is understandable. Its speed tier is a little too slow here to do a lot offensively, and Habaduh has a decent amount of Pokemon to prevent the bird from setting up a Quiver Dance, And he also left his Ursaring on the bench, which is a Pokemon I feel comes based off the player's feelings and thoughts over prep. Like, Ursaring is never bad, but do you have 6 Pokemon better than it this week? Nonetheless, Habaduh does have a Ghost type on his roster and decent switches such as Quillfish and Arcanine Hisui, but it definitely could have came, especially look at the final 6 Habaduh decided to bring. Houndsdove was benched. That Pokemon can't use Last Respects, therefore it's fucking garbage. Next, Pokemon he left on the bench was Armarouge, which is completely understandable. Habaduh has a great switch in Galarian Slowking and Rotom Wash, and great offensive checks in Arcanine Hisui and Lander's Eye. Last Pokemon left on the bench was Braviary Hisui. Similarly to Armarouge, it gets checked by the same defensive Pokemon and blown up by something like Arcanine Hisui. It's also too slow to really accomplish a ton in this matchup. Now for Habaduh's team. He did leave the Decidueye on the bench, which is understandable. Pokemon such as King Gambit, Tinkaton, and Enamorous are all annoying Pokemon for it to deal with, and at least 2/3 of those Pokemon were going to come. Quillfish was also left on the bench, which is a bit surprising, as it looks great as a defensive switch into a ton of Spoink's Pokemon. In my honest opinion, he probably just wanted a more offensive approach to the matchup instead of having a situation where for example, you either lose your Quillfish to Iron Leaves for no reason, or you switch out and you let it set up for free. It also doesn't do a ton to the King Gambit, and letting that guy set up a Swords Dance could be damning. Last Pokemon left on the bench was Braviary. Last Pokemon left on the bench was Braviary, which honestly doesn't look that bad here. But it does somewhat struggle breaking through Tinkaton and could probably get out set up by an opposing SD. So I do suspect Habaduh to leave with the Rotom Wash here, as it does pressure the Habaduh from setting up hazards immediately, and most likely gives Rotom a free Volt Switch or status if he has it. As for Spoink, he could lead Iron Leaf straight away to really step on the pedal turn 1, or he could leave with the Tinkaton, who could also be the Stealth Rock user. It can obviously eat any hit the Rotom goes for. However, catching an unnecessary Will-O-Wisp could be pretty awful. But with that said, let's begin. Let me put that on normal, I'm sorry. So yeah, Spoink actually leads with the Inteleon turn 1, as Habaduh does indeed lead with the Rotom. Very similar to the last game, the Rotom was a pretty free lead, and this game, especially Rotom Wash, who has been a great lead for its entire existence, leads here. Because I mean, look at his team. Again, the only way he could have really deterred it would have been leading with the Iron Leaves, but he did not do that. And Inteleon does lead. Obviously, you can't really do anything here. But Spoink is going to take advantage of the fact that Habaduh is probably going to play the safe very early on, and he's going to click U-turn and go straight into the Hippowdon, as obviously he does click the Volt Switch, because if you go into the ground type, it's not that big a deal, because unless you're a Scarf Rotom, you can just click Hydro Pump the turn after, or even Will-O-Wisp if you have it. And as you can see, that is exactly what he is going to do, as Spoink chooses to eat this, but he does not get Stealth Rock up. He actually is eject button, and he goes straight into the Iron Leaves. It's pretty strange prep, as obviously the Hippowdon was able to eat the Hydro Pump very easily, but now you force it out. It's left at 37% HP for whatever reason. But obviously the exchange is that you get a free switch into the Iron Leaves. And you can't be status by Will-O-Wisp. So you're able to get a free either substitute, or you can set up an SD immediately. And now you can really start putting the pressure. As for Habaduh, he doesn't exactly have any great responses. He could go into the G-King. But I would imagine this has a Terra for the Galarian Slowking if since it's one of the Terra captains, it's one of his 2, this one and the King Gambit, so I would imagine it's SD with some coverage for it. But yeah, Habaduh does actually switch into the Arcanine Hisui. Also, this is going to be very important to note, but the Iron Leaves did get a speed boost and not an attack boost. Iron Leaves has a much higher attack stat than a speed stat. So in order for the Iron Leaves to get a speed boost, it actually has to lower its offenses a little bit to actually have a speed stat higher than its attack stat. It's kind of similar to Kartana, except nowhere near as drastic, where you have to run Timid Nature 19 speed IVs. 19 attack IVs, because obviously Kartana has a much higher base attack stat, and Iron Leaves, even though it has a good attack stat, nowhere near as drastic in difference. So yeah, I think it's like 180 some attack is what you have to run in Iron Leaves, something of that nature. But as you're gonna see, Spoink does click substitute, as it's the easy click. Like, Rotom can't break your sub, and you can't get burns, obviously, and you know, his whole team doesn't really appreciate this. So once you get an SD up, you're looking pretty decent, as he actually does go into the Arcanine Hisui, which is interesting because I guess you're gonna make the call that he's not gonna click close combat turn 1, and if he clicks SD, maybe you have a Chople Berry, so you'll be able to eat the hit after, and then you can click whatever you want. But I can definitely see a regular Arcanine being the switch up, but a Hisuian Arcanine where you're weak to close combat is definitely interesting. But it's not stab, so obviously if you are a bulkier set, or if you even have a berry, you're going to eat that very, very easily. As now, Spoink is going to get the free SD up, and Arcanine does review a Flare Blitz, so he's going to take about 7% recoil to break that sub. And again, if he is Chople Berry, he's going to be able to eat, no matter what, he's going to be able to eat any hit this goes for, which is fine and dandy. But Habaduh does make a pretty strange play, and he Terra Darks instead of just attacking normally. So Terra Dark, I guess, is if this were to click a psychic move. But the thing is, you know, if you are this Iron Leaves, you have nothing else to click except Leaf Blade, because yeah, it gets a move called Side Blade, which is base 80 power, and Leaf Blade is base 90 power. So you're always going to click Leaf Blade if that's your choice of coverage. And even if he was worried about like a Zen Headbutt flinch, it doesn't even get it. Only regular Virizion does, and not its alternative form. So the Terra Dark is a little interesting. We never really got a reason, or I didn't see an explanation as to why he was Terra Dark. But I could have seen something like Terra Dragon, you know, if you're going to try to choose a Terra to like sort of pressure this thing. But again, I don't exactly know why he chose Terra Dark. Like, I guess you're making a really bold claim that he's not going to run, you know, close combat. But I guess also you have to remember, like, I guess if you are Habaduh, that the Slowking, he has to have cover for the Slowking to actually hit the team decently hard. So maybe he's thinking like a Terra of some, or Terra Dark maybe to avoid like a Terra Ground Iron Leaves, but you could just run Terra Dragon. So I don't know. Terra Dark is a little interesting, but as you're going to see, it is going to work out decently well in Habaduh's favor, as Leaf Blade does come out, Arcanine eats pretty easily, and the Iron Leaves does fall, as the Arcanine is able to take the recoil. So not exactly a great span of turns for Spoink, as he lost a lot of his HP on the Hippowdon, and one of his main wall breakers is now knocked out, as Inteleon is able to come in right now and obviously force the kill with U-turn. Habaduh has to figure out what money he wants in the field on this U-turn, as he's actually going to choose for that to be the Rotom Wash. It's very healthy, so like, why not? You may as well go into it, as he is going to go into the Tinkaton Spoink. And the reason why I think he does this now is, for one, he's probably thinking that the Rotom doesn't have a status move because it was a free click turn 1. If he has Will-O-Wisp, he would have probably clicked it into Hydro Pump. But since he did click Volt Switch immediately, Spoink is probably thinking that maybe this Rotom doesn't have Wisp. So that means even if the Tinkaton probably will not get status here. And it can set up rocks if it does have it. Which, as you're going to see, the Tinkaton does have Stealth Rock. And it only takes 20% from the Volt Switch, which makes me believe that this is a very especially defensive Tinkaton. As, I'm sorry, but yes, the Tinkaton actually clicks Knockoff into Stealth Rock. I'm sorry. But Knockoff is pretty good too, because if the Rotom Wash clicks like Hydro Pump, you can get rid of its item, or you can get rid of an item on anything. If Arcanine comes in, obviously it would probably be able to eat very, very easily, but I'm just not going to want to make that play because it's decently risky. As the Tinkaton is able to get the rocks up, Slowking does come in, and Slowking now gets up a T-Spike, which is a pretty big deal, because I didn't really mention this before, but Spoink doesn't actually have any grounded poison types, and His removers are Braviary, Hisui, and Oricorio. I kid you not, those are his only 2 hazard removers. So getting up those T-Spike for Pokemon such as Inteleon, such as a Alomomola, for Hippowdon, even if the Iron Leaves was still around, you could have poisoned that. So T-Spikes is a very, very good click. It's kind of why I was also thinking Quillfish wasn't a bad bring, but Slowking does have access to T-Spike now, so that's a very, very good move in this game. As in general, in the draft format, if your teammate does, or if your opponent doesn't have a poison type or a really good grass and poison type, then Toxic Spikes are always going to be a pretty good move to consider. And Habaduh did use that to his advantage. That's good game knowledge, in my opinion. As now Spoink has to consider how he's going to want to play with T-Spike for the rest of the game. As the Ticketon is actually going to reveal Encore, as he does Encore to Slowking into T-Spike, which I'm sure Habaduh is fine getting 2 sets of Spike. Obviously, as a result, Habaduh can't click something like, Chilling Reception, or even like an attacking move if he had it. But the Ticketon is able to force this thing into the T-Spike. So realistically, Ticketon is able to get another free knockoff because the Arcanine, unless its boots, will be coming in. And it might die to knockoff from 7%. I actually don't know. It might live, to be honest. But either way, knockoff is a pretty free click as the Rotom Wash does come in. And the Ticketon does knock it off, and he gets a crit too. So the Rotom is now very, very low. So now it's in range of Pokemon such as Inteleon, who, by the way, with that Slowking, now not having an item like a Assault Vest, Rotom being at 28, look at his water resist. The Inteleon is looking extremely nice all of a sudden. And this was another Pokemon for Citrus Berry, so Habaduh brought 2 Citrus Berry defensive Pokemon, which is pretty interesting. As now we sit at a very interesting point, as Spoink doesn't really have to fear what this Rotom's about to do, because it hasn't really been able to punish Ticketon with something like Will-O-Wisp. So Spoink is going to do exactly that. He's going to stay in again, take this Volt Switch as the Rotom does obviously click Volt Switch, and the Ticketon is going to click Knockoff, and the Ticketon is going to continue to click Knockoff, because the more chip he's able to get on these walls, the better. Rotom's already low, and if you can get Slowking to the point of no return, especially since rocks are up and it's no longer has boots, even if it did have it, the Slowking will basically not be able to take any hit from anybody, including that Inteleon, which again looks better and better by the second. And yeah, this does proc the Habaduh, the unsponsored coach, to go into the Landers. Takes that Stealth Rock damage, and if you are Habaduh, you're probably thinking, he's got no grounded poison, or he's got no grounded Pokemon in general. Earth Power is going to kill somebody. But it's going to be a very interesting sequence, as Habaduh does click Substitute, which is a good play for a couple reasons. One, if this doesn't have an item to take the hit, it's going to switch anyways. And 2, if he does, you're going to find out what he's going to do, which he actually stays in and clicks Ice Hammer. And as I said earlier, this is probably a very specially defensive Ticketon, and with a Shuka Berry, it might actually be able to take the Earth Power even after taking 2 Volt Switches, which is pretty insane. Shout out to Ticketon, pretty underrated Pokemon. As the Landers is actually forced out, so this basically confirms that the Ticketon was still out of range of Earth Power and would have annihilated the Landers with Ice Hammer. Call that Landers a Corviknight, because it would have got annihilated by that Ticketon's Hammer. So yeah, the Beartic does come in, reveals to be Heavy Duty Boots, and takes a measly 8% from that Ice Hammer. And we're going to see a very interesting tech from Habaduh as he pulls out his own Encore and Encores the Ticketon, and Ticketon misses the Ice Hammer. This is going to prove to be a pretty big deal. You might be wondering, like, what the fuck? It's just 8%. Like, why would I care about that? But you'll see what I mean later on. But yeah, he misses the very, very important 8% chip, or maybe if it was a roll, maybe like 6-7% chip on the Beartic, which again, it's a Beartic. You would probably think, it's not gonna be able to take any super effective move, but you will see what I mean later on. As this thing is obviously forced out, so it's going to switch into the Hippowdon, catch a T-Spike, and the Beartic does set up an SD. So all of a sudden you have a +2 Beartic in the snow with Slush Rush, I assume. So he's going to knock out the Hippowdon here, as he does lose the snow because the Slowking is not Icy Rock. It was Citrus Berry. So here comes the Inteleon. Habaduh is going to switch here, so even if this is a bulkier Beartic, it's still in range of Specs Hydro Pump. So, and again, as I mentioned, Habaduh no longer has any real counters to this Inteleon. Everything that comes in will die, whether it be anything. Like this Beartic, the Arcanine, the Rotom, the Slowking, the Landers, the Iron Valiant, everything is DED. So Habaduh has to make a decision of who he wants to sack, and he's going to choose for that to be the Rotom Wash. So Rotom Wash is going to get knocked out by Hydro Pump is what I would say about 80% of the time. But unfortunately, Spoink does miss, and he's going to have to take an extra round of toxic damage as a result, which is a bit unfortunate because the longevity of this Inteleon is good for being able to get more and more knockouts as the game goes on. So he is going to knock out the Rotom here is what I would say 80% of the time, but he once again misses another Hydro Pump. But instead of Habaduh clicking Volt Switch to knock this out for good, he does click Light Screen, which is interesting. I guess he just assumed he was going to die, but Volt Switch was a much better play. This is the only special attacker left. If you click Volt Switch as you miss, then you kill this anyways. So, I don't know. It's a very strange play to not just click Volt Switch, but it's okay. The Inteleon will now click the Hydro Pump and land this time, as this Rotom should have been dead way earlier. The Inteleon should have only been at about 94%, but now, as you're going to see, it drops down to 63. So it took about 20% unnecessary damage for no reason, when all it had to do was just, if it landed one Hydro Pump, even if the Iron Valiant comes in after, you still have a decently healthy Inteleon that can come in on something like Beartic, for example, or even the Slowking. But now all of a sudden, especially with the light screen up, this Inteleon is going to be forced out, as it is indeed actually forced out by the Slowking, because, well, it would have lived anyways, but it missed another Hydro Pump. This fucking Inteleon forgot his glasses, can't see for shit. He's got freaking astigmatism or something, because he just cannot see anything in front of him. 3 out of 4 Hydro Pumps missed, but as you're going to see, it doesn't actually matter because the Hydro Pump doesn't do enough. It would have done 20%, he was at 37%, so just very unfortunate for this Inteleon, as it's going to go down to about 7%, as the Iron Valiant does reveal Shadow Sneak. So very unfortunate circumstances for the Inteleon. If it was able to knock out the Rotom, there wouldn't be a light screen up. The Slowking would have been in range of pump. The Iron Valiant would have been forced to come in. I'm going to assume the Inteleon was Specs, but if it was Scarf, then that thing would have been extremely threatening, because it might have actually killed Iron Valiant, because that thing's special defense is completely garbage. So unless it's like an Assault Vest set, which is pretty uncharacteristic, I doubt it. That Inteleon was looking really good, but now the Inteleon is down in the dumps. It only got 1 kill when it could have realistically got like 3 or 4, but now this really puts Spoink behind. But Spoink does have an opportunity here with this King Gambit, because looking at his team, looking at Habaduh's team, I mean, he doesn't have great switch into Iron Head. In fact, this entire team is either weak to it or neutral to it. And you already have 3 fallen members, so this Pokemon doesn't actually look that bad. It actually looks like it can sort of put the team on its back, but you're going to have to preserve as much HP as you can, especially with the Terra, because T-Spike are up, and once you Terra Evolve to try to not be weak to the Iron Valiant, you are going to be prone to Toxic Spike, and that's going to be more damage you take over time, and the more damage you take, the more prone you are to die into the Valiant later, or maybe even the Landers if it's not in range of Sucker Punch. But as you're going to see, the King Gambit does Terra into a Terra Ghost type, because obviously you're in front of an Iron Valiant. You just cannot risk that. So he's going to Terra Ghost, knock out the Arcanite with the Iron Head, because once again that move was free as heck. Here comes the Landorus, and as you're the King Gambit, you're like, well, my entire team is weak to this guy, but I know that I can live any move this goes for, because I'm a King Gambit. So that's indeed what he does. Landorus clicks Earth Power, does 58%, eats that for breakfast, as the King Gambit does 43% with the Cowtown Cleave, but you have Sucker Punch anyways, so it doesn't actually matter. As in comes the Beartic, and this is very interesting, because if you are the King Gambit, you're like, well, I can still click Iron Head and probably knock this out, because I have 3 fallen members and I'm super effective stab damage. But as you're going to see here, the Beartic actually reveals to be faster. And we already saw Encore earlier, so this is nothing new. But the King Gambit, I don't know if he has speed, I don't know if the Beartic has speed, but I mean, very funny situation, because they're both the same base speed stat, excuse me. So it's interesting if they had speed, how much each one put. Obviously, at the end of the day, we knew Habaduh had more speed on his Beartic than Spoink had on his King Gambit. But now the King Gambit is in an awkward position. Now, if you're the Beartic, you can click EQ if you want, because Alomomola comes in and takes poison damage anyways. And if Ticketon comes in and takes the EQ, then it might honestly die, because it's special defensive based off the damage. But the thing is, if he does have a Shuka Berry, it hasn't actually been popped. So the Beartic does click SD. I mean, it was good for if Alomomola came in. If the Ticketon came in, even if he clicks Raw Earthquake, the Shuka Berry would have been up, so he wouldn't have died. And he would actually not be forced out, though, because it's revealed knockoff, Stealth Rock, Encore, and Ice Hammer. So he could actually stay in, theoretically. But now the Beartic knows that he's slower, and this will definitely Encore him. So he has to switch in prediction of that, which he does. He's going to go into the Slowking as the Tikaton does click Encore. And the Slowking is now going to click Chilling Reception because, interestingly enough, we have not seen him attack. But we do see, or we have seen, 3 of the moves on the Slowking, which is T-Spike, Chilly Reception, and Slack Off. So we don't know if it's like last move Future Sight, last move, not Scald, excuse me. Last move, like just Sludge Bomb or Psychic or any of that nature. I would imagine it's probably just Sludge Bomb, but we don't know. We never see it. As the Alomomola does come in, as the Iron Valiant comes in, and Habaduh doesn't really want to risk anything, so he's actually going to just double back into the Slowking as a way to scout what this Alomomola wants to do, which is actually going to be Spoink's secret weapon, as he clicks Healing Wish, revives the King Gambit, gets poisoned, but he's carrying a Lumberry. So all of a sudden, you have a full HP King Gambit, and you don't even take the poison damage because you had a Lumberry, and everything is looking good. You have a free Cowtown Cleave on your opponent. You knock out the Slowking, or you're going to get a big-ass hit on the Beartic, or you hit the Iron Valiant, and then you just kill it after with Iron Head, because, you know, you don't die to anything, and everything else is going to get 2-shot or O-code by Iron Head. So, you just click Cowtown Cleave, and you knock out the Slowking, which is, you know, that's great. You make it a 2v2, but you instead click Iron Head, and you do not kill the Slowking, which is interesting. I don't know why you don't click the Cowtown Cleave. I'm assuming, and I'm going to assume it's because if you click Cowtown Cleave, then the Beartic can come in, and he can Encore you into Cowtown Cleave, and then all of a sudden, you would be in a somewhat awkward position. But the thing is, you still have a Tikaton that hasn't burned its Chicoberry, and you can always Encore the Beartic into anything that it goes for. So, you don't have to worry about... Basically, you should just attack what's in front of you right now. If you knock out the Slowking, then it gets rid of a sack that he could potentially have for King Gambit in the future, assuming that you lose a Tikaton to something, and then you go into the King Gambit. You can just sack the Slowking after, and then he can go into the Iron Valiant and then win the game, so on and so forth. But now you have the Slowking that lives. He's going to go into the Beartic, and this is going to be the part where it gets really bad for Spoink, because the Beartic clicks Crash, doesn't really do too much damage. You can potentially get a kill here with Iron Head if you don't get flinched, but he does, and that is going to essentially seal the game for Mr. Spoink, because all Habaduh has to do is land another Crash. If he does, then the Tikaton and the King Gambit are going to be in range of the Iron Valiant, because Tikaton can't actually hit the Iron Valiant very hard. It's got a pretty good defense stat, and the only thing Tikaton has is Ice Hammer and Knockoff for its physical coverage, which are going to hit the Iron Valiant like wet paper. So, as long as Habaduh lands his Icicle Crash, he's going to win the game, as he does. And the Beartic freaking lives Iron Head, which is unfucking believable. I'll show you the calc right now on the screen, but even if he's max Fizz Def, it would take about 89% minimum with 4 fallen members. So, the Beartic does have speed, so obviously Spoink just isn't like max attack adamant. But even so, like, he's probably invested somewhat, and the Beartic just ate that for freaking breakfast, bro. It's like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, that's fucking ridiculous. Like, you can't make that shit up. And, well, Habaduh does, no, Spoink doesn't want to be encored into Iron Head, because then you could just go into Iron Valiant, get the knockoff on the Tikaton, and CC it and win the game. But the game is over. No matter what he does, the Iron Valiant is going to clean the game up. As he does go into the Tikaton, takes a large amount of damage from Icicle Crash, which, again, because it's especially defensive, it's not Fizz Def at all. So it's going to take a lot of damage from that no matter what. And that damage is going to essentially just seal the game, as Beartic is sacked to the knockoff, but the damage is done. Habaduh comes in with his Iron Valiant, and he's going to click CC on the Tikaton, and then he is going to reveal knockoff for the King Gambit. Even if it didn't kill somehow, he had poison. It was gonna always kill, basically. So that is going to be GG to Mr. Spoink, as Spoink had a very, very, very big chance to win this game, but Inteleon couldn't land a Hydro Pump, and then the Ice Hammer miss actually prevented the Beartic from dying, because as you saw, it barely lived. Let me actually go back to the percent that it lived on. It lived on 3%, as I'll let this play in the background. The Beartic lived on 3%, and if you recall, the first Ice Hammer did about 6%. So, if he lands both those Ice Hammers, the Beartic wouldn't have actually took the Iron Head, and obviously that wouldn't have mattered if he got the flinch anyways, because the flinch basically sealed the game. Because if he doesn't get the flinch, the King Gambit's at about like 64%, and there's no way with an itemless King Gambit that the Valiant would have killed him. So he would have been able to get the knockout on the Slow King, and he would have been able to knock out the Valiant, and that would have been a very easy win. But the flinch fucked him, and then all those misses on the Rotom, on the Slow King. Well, the Slow King didn't really matter because the light screen got up, but like the Rotom getting up a light screen, and as a result having the Slow King live the Hydro Pump after, and having everything else live a Hydro Pump after, was just really, really bad for Spoink. If none of that really goes awry for him, he probably wins this game. But I want to give props to Habaduh nonetheless. He did play the game as well as he could. Pretty good set for the Iron Leaves, as you know, with it coming in on a Rotom for free, it definitely could have snowballed. But with the set that it had, it was kind of limited to the moves it could carry, so he probably would have been okay-ish. But I don't know, maybe not. Maybe he had something for the Galarian Slow King. But even if he was Terra Ground, he didn't click it on the Arcanine, which I assumed he would have, but whatever. As yeah, Habaduh does go to 1-0 +2, as Spoink goes to 0-1 -2. So once again, GG to both players, and a very entertaining game. As for the next game, we are going to have a very hype battle of Mr. Genius X versus the Gypsy King, two notoriously good battlers. And if you guys are excited for that game, please leave a like and a comment. And if you enjoyed the video, do the same as well. It means a lot to me, as I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. So yeah, see ya, and until then, enjoy playing Pokemon.